All right, so anyone remember these? Safe show of hands. This was my dad's cue to get behind the GTV and adjust the focus and the contrast.
Can I say, the first time I saw that, we had a 3-inch television screen in my house.
Yeah, ours wasn't much bigger.
And then they used to put.
All right, so it's just, we're going to hop aboard the NCDXC Wayback Machine for a little trip down memory lane. Now, the NCDXC is the Northern California DX Club. And there is a tie-in to the Oakland Yacht Club. 1962, your Commodore was a man named Elvin Fegge, W6TT, one of the charter members of our organization that was founded in October of 1946, when I was 4 months old. So we're going to crank up the Wayback Machine to full power. And we're going to talk about the third man, or how two 15-year-old boys saved amateur radio. And often very small, coincidental, my director has small coincidental events and circumstances create changes in history. And this is one of these events. And this is the story told by a participant in this event that changed amateur radio forever. So I was doing some research for another presentation I was doing for my radio club, and I happened across a narrative by one of the eyewitnesses to this event. And as I read the narrative, I began to realize what I had discovered. Now, it was just out there on the internet. And what it turned out to be was the script of a speech given to the Old Timers Radio Banquet of Hartford County, Connecticut, Amateur Radio Association. This was given February 27, 1937 in Hartford, Connecticut. And our eyewitness narrative to this event is the speaker's script. So after reading this speech in detail, I went right down the rabbit hole. So, and it was a wonderful journey, and I'm going to let you in on what we found. The first thing I came across in my research was in 1910. It was the 1910 census. The Ball family was living at 333 Vine Street. There is 333 Vine Street's a duplex. The Ball family lived in the lower part of the duplex. You'll see Mrs. Ball on the porch. We'll examine this photo a little bit later. William E. Ball, the father, was the director of parks in Hartford City, Connecticut. Previously, he'd been director of parks and roads for the Jamestown Centennial in 1905. But he's here, his wife Lillian is here, and William Warren Cooper Ball, his son, 13 years old, was living there. And Bill Ball was fascinated with radio. So Bill met a friend who was also fascinated by radio at the Northwestern Grammar School in Hartford, Connecticut. This building may not exist now, but I captured this image off the internet. And that's the building where he and his friend, who became fascinated with radio at an early age, met. And their interests merged and they became fast friends. They were both about 13 years old. And Bill's new friend had moved in from Nyack, New York. Had myself. Now, just to set a frame of reference, state of the art amateur radio 1909. Here's the May 1909 call book. And it listed 89 amateur radio stations. The 89 that could transmit. There were lots of amateurs out there that only listened. But these were the 89 that they knew were transmitting. That's how they identified them. This predates any government regulation of amateur radio. Everyone just sort of made up their own call sign, usually 3 letters. And at this time, radio was the domain of experimenters, hobbyists, and amateurs. So the technology was just out there. It was nascent. It was floating in the air. Yes?
Do you know if they were able to transmit and receive voice, or
No.
it was all just
No, it's all Morse code. And not only was it all Morse code at this time, but it's all spark gap.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So the old Model T spark coils were often charged up and discharged in order to create this broad spectrum signal that could be heard here and there. Now, Bill's friend had moved from Nyack, New York, and Bill's friend had a cousin in Manhattan that helped Bill's friend build his first receiver. And he comments in his narrative that he received radio signals from the Brooklyn Navy Yard. There was the Brooklyn Navy Yard in 1910, 28 miles away. It was amazing. Now you can see this charming picture. There's a dog in the picture just inside the gate. You see a little dog. It's not exactly a fortress, you know, it's got a crenellated tower, but also has ground level windows. So I don't think they were expecting much of an assault. But that's what sparked Bill's friend's interest in amateur radio. Was his cousin building him a receiver. Well, Bill's friend's father died under somewhat scandalous conditions, and he and his mother moved to Hartford where they had family, and that's how Bill and his friend met. So the two boys lived very close to Kenny Park in Hartford, Connecticut. Bill was up on Vine Street, his friend was on Oakland Terrace, less than a mile away. Probably spent a lot of time cutting through the park. They were really interested in amateur radio, and they made model airplanes. Right, so those are the two things that they were really interested in. So Bill and his friend were very interested in radio model airplanes, and they avidly read Electrical Experimenter and Modern Electronics. Now there's a 1915 view of the cover of Electrical Experimenter. It looks like a satellite over the moon. Yeah. So they were thinking about these things at that time. Here's Modern Electrics, shows a man apparently piloting a spacecraft with another flying saucer in the middle, surrounded by electrical equipment. And there were two young men amateurs of the time, so you can see the kind of equipment that they had. And they found by reading these that there were other wireless experimenters in Hartford. And there was even a club, had the headquarters at Harry Chapman's house on Westfield Avenue. There was a wireless station, big commercial broadcast station that had been abandoned out on one of the boulevards north of town. So very shortly afterwards, a wireless station was installed at Bill's friend's house. And the partner and these two boys began to manufacture wireless apparatus and even installed complete stations for people. Now they're 13, 14 years old. So here's a representative, and the little R symbol, by the way, is all representative. When you see the R symbol, it means that the photo is representative and not an actual photo of the people we're talking about. The two boys were experimenting with the two new accessible and emerging technologies, aviation and radio. There's a picture of an amateur radio station in 1912. That's a 9GY station. And the important thing is they could do really neat stuff with this. They could build airplanes and fly them in the park. So the partnership of B&T formed. Now, this is not the boys, but this is what boys looked like in 1910. Okay. They wore hats. They had single or double breasted suit coats, dirty shoes, which comes with being a boy, sometimes tie, sometimes not. And the narrator says about 1910, 1911, there blossomed the youthful partnership of B&T. So Bill and his friend were soon discovered that B&T was short of working capital. They're having cash flow problems. So they needed some financial backing if B&T was going to continue to succeed. Now, fortunately, Bill's mom, Lillian E. Ball, made wonderful pies that she sold to friends and family. And according to our narrator, there was always a supply of ready cash in a cracker jar that she kept on one of the kitchen shelves. So, two boys being smart boys, one day the pitch was made to the VC. Mother, will you please lend us $20 so that we can buy 6 sets of Branda's headphones at a discount? And she said, yes, son, I will. Let me see how much is in the cracker jar just now. Well, as a frame of reference, $20 in 1910 is the equivalent of $678 US. So mom had a lot of faith for son Bill. And sure enough, the partnership of B&T were soon selling Branda's headphones to amateurs in Hartford and building complete stations. Now, Brandy's was a Canadian company. They had a New York City. They could get 20% discount on 6 headphone sets, COD Hartford. And they also used the money to buy components from vendors that were listed in the magazines that they read. They also discovered that Harris Parker, which no longer exists, the building is gone on Asylum Street, it was at 43 Asylum Street, would take their model airplanes and their radio gear on consignment and sell it for them. So now they had a going business. They had a set of customers, they had a retail outlet, they had funding. So you ended up with cash flow that looked like this, right? Mom made the pies, filled up the cracker jar. They'd borrow from the cracker jar. They'd buy the brandies. They'd buy components. They'd sell it through Harris Parker Direct. Retained earnings would go into a piggy bank. I chose that image because that's the piggy bank I had when I was about 12. And that is how they operated for a while. Until Somewhere in mid 1911, B&T's retained earnings B&T's retained earnings allowed the partnership to improve their products. And they made a special receiver. And this is a representative picture, but the narrator describes it in some detail. Enameled wire, a hex form, a pine base that was stained brown, a lot of detail there. And Harris Parker accepted it for consignment. And the boys felt really proud because there at Harris Parker, the owner put this new radio in the window. So they were front page news. Shortly thereafter, and sometime in the summer of 1911, Bill's friend looked in the window at Harris Parker and the radio was gone. It must have been sold. So Bill's friend goes in and talks to the clerk, and he arrives at the clerk, and there is the radio sitting on the counter. So instead of receiving the $5 that he was supposed to receive, the clerk said, well, the radio was taken on approval by this gentleman that lived on Prospect Street. He was a renowned engineer, and he brought it back, so it must not work. Well, Bill and his friend knew it worked. They tested it. Sure, you needed an aerial on it. You needed to select the right spot on the little crystal, germanium crystal, but it worked fine. So both their mothers encouraged them, and Bill Ball encouraged his friend to say, okay, let's go talk to this gentleman and find out what the problem was. Because we know it works. So the two boys, they said, dressed in their dignified long pants that they got from graduating from elementary school, went down to 550 Prospect Avenue. They went up these stairs, probably not those stairs because those are concrete. They were probably wood back in the day, but clearly through that door and rang the bell. And the door was answered by a rather distinguished gentleman.
I knew that was coming.
And the gentleman
Yep.
was Hiram Percy Maxim. Now, Hiram Percy Maxim, here at age 42, an MIT graduate, the son of Hiram S. Maxim, who invented the Maxim gun, the devil's paintbrush. And Hiram Percy Maxim was famous for patenting the Maxim silencer, which he invented in order to make target shooting an indoor sport, believe it or not. But anyway, his patents went on to be used for all sorts of sound deadening applications, mufflers and so forth. So, and Hiram Percy Maxim is a polymath. He was interested in mechanical engineering, he was interested in filmmaking, he was interested in cars, and he was interested in radio, interested in enough to go try this radio out. So Hiram Percy Maxim and these two radio heads met on this day. And it's a most significant meeting because this was Bill Ball and Clarence Tuska. B&T were Ball and Tuska. And they met Hiram Percy Maxim. And Tuska, who's our narrator, says, oh, he invited us, we explained why we were there. He invited us into the parlor. And Maxim, one of his sock garters, this is before there were elastic top socks, people wore sock garters to keep their socks up. Said one of his sock garters had come loose and was trailing behind him. And Maxim says, and they ask him, well, why did you return it? Didn't it work? And Maxim says, well, it worked fine, but it was too small. It looked like a toy.
Huh.
And I want a real station. He knew what a real radio station was. So then Maxim asked the boys, if I gave you carte blanche, what would you do for me? And the boys had this fevered conversation about that. So Maxim asked him to write out a proposal for all the components and everything. And they did, and they presented it to him there that day in his parlor. And they received the order. So they bought the components, installed the apparatus, and there you see it. That is the attic station. That was Maxim's first station. Now, and that's not the end of the story, it's really the beginning. There was no mention of a deposit on this project, so we have to assume that in full or in part, Mrs. Ball's cracker jar played a role in financing this endeavor. And that it was at this point that my research miracle happened. This is my favorite Harris cartoon. I think it should be more explicit here in step 2. This is exactly what happened to me right here in the middle of researching this. I was put in touch with a member of the Bill Ball's family who knew everybody that was involved. I learned a lot of interesting details about the personalities in play here, and that's one of the reasons I can tell this story. The other important thing to note here is that no one in the Bill Ball family had any idea whatsoever of Bill's involvement in amateur radio, his interest in amateur radio, or his participation in any of these events. Nothing. This all came completely out of left field for them. So at this point, grateful appreciation for their assistance. Google, first of all, thank you. Michael Mariano, WN1M, now silent key. He was the ARRL archivist and historian. Michelle Tom, who broke the case for me. She was the librarian and archivist for the Windsor, Connecticut Historical Society. She put me in touch with Mrs. Dorothy T. Ball.
Wow.
The daughter-in-law of Bill Ball. She's 102 now. She was in her late 90s when I contacted her. And I have received no indication that she's passed away. So she's probably still with us. And Hiram H. Maxim II, the grandson of Hiram Percy Maxim, the son of Hiram Hamilton Maxim. He's a professor of German studies and linguistics at Emory. So I got to meet and interact with these people, which was an amazing thing. Now, this picture that we've seen before, we think the young amateur sitting at the desk is a useful CD Tusca. And when I say we, I mean Hiram III and I looking at the photos. You see Bill Ball's features are a lot more rounded. Tusca's more oval, angular. And there is Hiram Hamilton Maxim, Hiram's father, in 1914. So I think what we're seeing here is a picture of Hiram Maxim and Tuska in the attic station. Now, this makes a lot of sense because, can I help you?
No, I'm just looking.
Tuska, as we know, lost his father. So this association, Hamilton became Tuska's surrogate father. And that relationship was very tight, very close, and led to all the things that we have now. The Noah Webster poster or pennant, that's Hamilton's elementary school in Hartford. And it was hung there. Tuska also mentions that Hamilton learned the code about 6 seconds, and Maxim struggled with it. This was from the radiogram in June 1915. So we can assume from this that the picture was taken somewhere in the winter of 14 or early 1915. One presentation is complete without pie charts. Now we're going to have some pie charts, but not the type you're used to seeing. Okay. Boom. Hiram Percy Maxim's pie chart. There's Mrs. Ball, her famous pies funding B&T creates the event that we saw. Okay. In 1912, Hiram Percy Maxim was very politically connected. He knew lots of folks. He got wind of the fact that in 1912, this is less than a year after his encounter with the boys, that Congress was about to pass the Radio Act of 1912. And as originally drafted, amateur radio operators are going to be cut out completely. Okay, cut out completely. At that time, scientific thinking was anything from 200 meters down was useless. All right. Yep. And everything 200 meters and above in wavelength was going to be, but they were going to take it all. And Maxim helped lobby Congress to include 200 meters down for amateur radio. In 1914, along with Tuska, he founded the ARRL. In 1925, he went to he was the US delegate to the International Amateur Radio Union and its foundation. And then in 1919, he helped introduce House Joint Resolution 217, which, by the way, made sure the Navy the military did not take all of the radio frequencies. So kept it preserved. All because of the pies. All because of the pies. Now, Clarence Tuska, part of B&T, there he is in 1914, 1916, and 1918. 1918, let's be clear, he's a lieutenant in the United States Army, instrumental in developing aircraft-borne radio systems. He was the guy. 1921 to 22, he had WQB. He was a commercial broadcaster, one of the first in that area of the country. Used to broadcast organ recitals from the movie theater, which still had a big pipe organ, of course. He founded the QST. That was his publication. The ARRL eventually floated a bond issue that allowed the ARRL to buy it from Tuska. Tuska went on to found Tuska Radio, and you can still find Tuska radios and Tuska radio ads on the internet. Clarence Tuska became the director of patents for RCA.
Wow.
And his son, James, is shown here working on the early prototypes of collision avoidance radar for automobiles. So everything you see in the Tesla and the auto nav and auto drive now have some origins here. It's all traced back to that pie, right? Now we get into William Ball. And thank you, Mrs. Ball, for naming William Warren Cooper Ball, which helped me find him among all the William Balls in the universe. During World War I, he was the United States Navy yeoman, radioman on the SS Harrisburg, the veteran of 3 combat cruises, Harrisburg to England for the war effort, taking material and men back and forth. Submarines were out there, so combat veteran. There's his discharge. William Warren Cooper Ball. He went in on 6/6/1917. He was discharged 12/20/1918, just in time to get home for Christmas and some of his mom's pie. No doubt. Now, I said we talk about this a little bit. The original photo I showed of the Ball house. What we see here is Mom Lillian Ball displaying the Blue Star family flag in recognition of Bill's service in the Navy. This was a very special photo to Bill. It was found in his papers. Because once I contacted Dorothy, they decided to go through his old papers, the old boxes that no one ever looked in. Bingo. Now, but old Bill isn't done yet. He's a charter member of the ARRL. It shows here that he had a 125 watt station. He worked 15 words per minute. There's a notation there that says phone. Not phone as we know it. It means he had a telephone in his home. No numbers yet. Just telephone. And the telephone company had a list of subscribers. So you call, you'd say, I want to speak to Bill Ball in Hartford, Connecticut. And they look at them. Okay. Telephone connection. In 21, he became a member of the National Association of Cost Accountants. Probably kept the books for the early partnership. He was on the Town Planning and Zoning Commission in Windsor, Connecticut. And lived in that house. So Bill Ball later became president of Taylor and Fenn Company. They were a quality foundry there in Hartford. President of the Windsor Historical Society, and that's the connection I made when I called Michelle Tom. Here's his World War II draft card. He was a bit old for World War II, but his son, Warren Cooper Ball, was a distinguished naval officer during the Second World War. And all this goes back to the pie, of course. So William Warren Cooper Ball was the third man, and his call sign was SNC. We don't know why. He was a boyhood friend and wireless technology experimenter with CD Tuska, business partner with Tuska, probably key to financing Tuska's early wireless experiments and products. He and Tuska met with Maxim on that day, and the chemistry was enough to propel Maxim forward in his interest in radio. Here we get to see Bill Ball later in life. This photo is about 1960 when he was president of Taylor and Fenn Company. He was born June 5th, 1896, and died in October of 1990. So he was around recently. Here's Lily and Emily Ball, one of our Harvey's first angel venture capitalists, right? She's got baking skills. She got trust in her son's judgment. Generosity played a role in making amateur radio what it is today. Born in 1867, passed away in April 1950. And in this photo, all of this comes out of Bill Ball's documents. You can see a little bit of the gentle nature of Mrs. Ball and the family dog, by the way. And there's Bill Ball, age about, I don't know, 1, and his mother. Nope. I miss my moment. I miss my moment. If I had only known then what I know now. So there I am, January 1968, WN2JLQ up in Poughkeepsie, New York. Clarence Tuska was still holding forth down there at Cranberry Township in New Jersey, and Bill Ball was still in Windsor, Connecticut. I could have called them up and said, let's meet in Stanford. I'll buy you pie. But I didn't know any of this stuff, but it was there. Now we get into the really weird realm here. Mark Twain said, truth is stranger than fiction. It's because fiction is obliged to stick to possibilities, and truth isn't. Strange things bubble up when you are searching around on the internet. One of the strange things was in 1916, the call sign 1AW was assigned to a resident of this house. But it's not who you think it is. Call sign W1AW was first issued to Earl Ham. Go figure. Earl Ham. So he was literally one of the first ham operators. Pardon me for bringing that up. Maxim who had a well-developed sense of humor, really like this. One of them was Earl Ham. Really? Yes, really. You just can't make this stuff up. So, I have a poignant postscript here. I can find no record. Let's see if I get this to work. Come on. I had animated these things. I can find no record that any descendant of these 3 men were ever licensed as an amateur band. So they did what they did when they did it, and we're all beneficiaries of what they did. But no one in their family, and I talked to Hiram III about that, and he said, no one. My daughter may have shown a little interest. I said, please encourage her. So, for Mrs. Dorothy Ball and family, the Northern California DX Club, some of my friends and I went together and made sure that Bill Ball had a brick on the Diamond Terrace in memory of his contributions. And that's what the brick looked like. They sent me a picture before they had filled in all the sand alongside it.
That's at radio station 1AW or where?
Yeah, that's the
Okay.
Memorial Station. So, not satisfied with the presentation, I managed to get QSD to publish an article on Bill Ball, September 2023. And they took my story and beat it with hammers until it fit on the page. But it basically tells the story. And our script was Clarence Tuska's speech at the Old Timers Radio Banquet. He was the speaker. This was about a year after Maxim passed away. Maxim died in February of 36. He had been on a trip out to see the Lick Observatory, fell ill in La Junta, New Mexico, I think, and passed there. So, what do we have here? Oh, Clarence Tuska was interviewed in the 70s, and we'll see if we can get some audio out of here.
In 1908, when I first became interested, a cousin who had previously installed a station of his own in New York City decided that I should have one when I lived in Nyack. So he made a single slide tuning coil, an EI electrolytic detector, and a spark coil for the transmitter. These early days, I used no call limit. The government did not regulate amateur wireless at that time, and there was no need for a call limit. The range of the transmitter was about 1.5 miles in the town of Nyack. Later, when I moved to Hartford, about 1909, I adopted the call letter SNT. SN stood for Southern New England, T for Tuska, and other people in the vicinity of Hartford used the same system. When I was about 14 years old, I learned that Mr. Maxim was interested in getting into amateur radio. I became acquainted with him and built his first amateur radio station, which consists of a loose coupler, a variable condenser, a crystal detector. The transmitter consists of a spark coil, some condensers, and a helix.
Where'd you find that?
Deep in the bowels of
Down
the internet. Okay, so here are the signatures of the three men. For show and tell, I can pass around an original
Oh, wow.
autograph from Hiram Percy Maxim.
That's an interesting script.
It is,
It's very, very small.
yeah, very, very precise. You can see the engineer's hand in his signature. There's Bill Ball's signature, and then C.D. Tuska's signature. C.D. Tuska's signatures are out there on the early American Radio Relay League station appointments or membership certificates. That's number 100 there.
Ball was a little more outgoing, wasn't he? By his signature.
Yeah,
I would say that Maxim was left-handed.
Could be.
it could be. It could well
He
be.
tilts to the left, yeah.
Now, Mrs. Ball, Mrs. Dorothy Ball, at the bottom of the box, the bottom of the last box, found this bit of stationery from William Warren Cooper Ball about 1918. It says William W.C. Ball wireless apparatus, 445 Edgewood Street. In the upper left, it says telephone connection. Ask the operator, Hartford, Connecticut, and it says wireless apparatus. So that is a bit of ephemera that is, it's amazing that we have it. The other thing that Dorothy Ball found was a letter from Tusca to Bill Ball. And the letter basically says, thought you'd enjoy seeing this. When you're finished, if you don't need the copy, I could use it. When I get to Hartford next, I hope for time to see you. The February 27th trip was a rush. Sincerely, CD Tusca. And he mailed him a typewritten copy of the speech.
Oh, this is the speech.
So Bill Ball and Clarence Tusca remained friends all through this period. Now, my stranger than fiction connection to all this is Hiram Percy Maxim is buried in my hometown of Hagerstown, Maryland. He's buried there because he married Josephine Hamilton, the daughter of former Governor Hamilton of Maryland. He passed away in 1936. This plaque was put there by the Antietam Radio Association, my very first radio club. And when I was president there, I campaigned for a memorial plaque. It never happened, but later on, someone got the idea that it should and put that there. Now, interestingly enough, Josephine Hamilton Maxim died 10 days after her husband died. And the reason for that was she attended her husband's funeral in early March and became ill and died of pneumonia as a result.
Wow.
So they're both buried there. I was born in the hospital less than a mile away. Go figure. And somehow I got drawn into this situation. So here I am checking in with W1AW in 2014 when I was back in town for my high school reunion.
By the way, that's 2014 is the 100th anniversary of ARRL as
It
well.
is. And QST. Well, QST was a year later. So that's all I got. Questions, comments?
You could fast backward to that crystal set with the headphones.
Tell me when I'm there.
Keep going. Where you emphasize the headphones. There. The headphones. Right there, right there.
Yeah.
Okay, the ones on the right,
Mhm.
they look just about precisely identical to the set that I had when I built my first crystal radio.
Yeah.
Somewhere before sixth grade. And I believed I used a needle and a chunk of galena as the detector. And I
Well,
did build one of the coils to tune in local AM broadcast. No, guys, not Spark Gap,
right,
but AM radio.
they're actually people. Yeah, and these, there was no audio amplification at this
No.
point.
They're very sensitive.
It's all just rectification
That's right.
of the RF incoming signal.
Right.
And so that's what you got on the other, just two pins.
I mean, that's plain as day. I can see it. I mean, that's the same thing I used.
So now we know why amateur radio is the way it is. And somewhere in the mix, it's because somebody made great pie.
So if anyone's interested, I can email you a copy of the original schematic of one of the first hand cranked wall mounted telephones. Because at the Radio Museum's auction tables, which some of us volunteers are setting up, there was one of those phones. And I wanted that thing, and fortunately, somebody else bought it because I don't have room in my garage, or anyway, I got too many drawers, but you could open it up. And on the inside was the original schematic and servicing instructions, which I thought was, I took a photo of that schematic. But what was neat is that crank works a magneto to send the ringer voltage down the wires, which